code. Okay, so we are discussing first OOP1. We will divert from mainly developing the logic of our application, and we also develop entire codes to supplement the logic of our application. What is OOP, or Object-Oriented Programming? It is a programming paradigm or a set of ideas which is centered in the use of an object. So what is an object? It is a presentation of intangible, which is visible or touchable, and also an intangible, which is unable to touch or unable to see, that possess some levels of information. And this object can be anything from day-to-day materials we use to classification like the Congress. The only thing that limits them is the information that they possess for us to implement afterwards through programming. Advent of an object-oriented programming means to see the history of the programming. In 1967, its practice came as early in the time. In the same year, programming language such as Simula used a feature which regard now as the fundamental of an object-oriented programming. A Simula also is a programming language specialized in simulation. That's why it's called a Simula, and developed by Ole Johan Dahl and Kristen Nygaard at Norwegian Computing in Oslo. And then here comes an Alan Kai working in the university. He used the feature presence and Simula as inspiration to come up with the idea of OOP or object-oriented programming. And then Xerox PARC, which is late in 1970s, object-oriented programming as a programming paradigm was born. That was 1970. And then there was a first computer book that was created using OOP, which is a Dynabook. And in the Smalltalk also was the OOP or Object-Oriented Programming Language built specifically for Dynabook and became popular at the time. Bjorn Stroop, he inspired to integrate this paradigm to the popular programming language. It is in 1980s the C language, and then now C++ was gave birth as a programming language that supports OOP. And then the concept behind object and OOP has two properties, which has two properties in the methods. The properties like color, width, height, and volume of the bags, and then the methods can be anything like get width or get height and function for our box object. Later on we will discuss it and we will use that one so that you will know better and have an idea. And then there are two basic categories under OOP. The first one is a prototype base. What is a prototype base? It's a subset of OOP which focuses on reusability of the object in terms of extending initial state to a further defined state. It's created by the developer, which will be copied and modified during runtime to represent the final state of an object it truly represents. Example of this, just like a blank book contains all necessary information like subject and temporary author, publisher, and a year of the publication. During runtime, the blank book will be populated with additional information through its methods. The info may come from user output or a database. And then the second one is a class-based. It is a subset of OOP or object-oriented programming which will focus on abstract representation of an object. Abstract representation means there is no initial presence in an object definition. In this design, object may share the same properties and methods. As compared to prototype, this object are copies of their base object and not all throughout new object. There are class-based C++. Classes are an abstract representation of an object, but it is not an object. You can think of them as plans of an object that have properties and methods. The next one is the header files. Are separate files, which is this one. A separate files seen C++ structures where extra codes were pasted and supplement to main application. It is also reused to huge range of source codes for use of a different application. But this is not convertible to C++ application. And now there are three scope declarations. The first one is a public scope. The second is a private scope. The third one is a protected scope. We will discuss it one by one. First, the public scope makes the properties and methods under it accessible to anyone within the outside of the class. And then the private one, scope, it limits the access to the properties and methods under it to only the class were defined. The third one is a protected scope. Protected scope. It is limit to access to the properties and methods under it to the class itself and all classes that inherits it. And then there are four properties under the box class. The first one is a char color, which is character color. The second is an int length. The third is int width. The fourth is int height. And there are another function within the box class. The first one is the constructor box. It could be included int length, int width, or int height. And then the second is the int get volume. Later on in VS Code, you will see this and how we do it. And then there's also a constructor. What is a constructor? It's a special non-prerequisite function named as the class itself. It is created to initialize several properties or perform operation for the class upon declaration. The int_get_volume function, we didn't have any code block under the two functions. This is to promote code readability since we're declaring the scope, function name, and parameters of the function. The four principles in OOP or object-oriented property. The first one is encapsulation. The second is abstraction. The third is inheritance. The fourth is polymorphism. The first one we will discuss encapsulation. It is a principle of OOP which groups the functionalities and states of the certain areas in a code block. The second one is abstraction. Generalize the properties and methods of classes in such a way that the implementation is hidden from outside the class. And then the third is inheritance, which extends the features and functionalities of existing classes and interfaces. The fourth is polymorphism, which allow multiple variation and version of the same function sharing the same name. And then there are two additional scope, which is the accessor and then the mutators. The accessor first, this one, is a method within the class that enables the retrieval of values hidden by scope. Accessor are methods within the return type, like the data type of the properties. Accessors also as parameters less methods. The accessor also should never assign values to its reference properties. The last one, accessors also as prefix with get in the function name. We will use this one in our VS Code. And then the second one is the mutators. It is the method within the class that enables the assignment of value of our properties hidden by scope. Mutators have one parameter. Mutators may or may not return to final assigned value. Mutators are prefixed with set in their function. The accessor prefix with get, and the mutators have set prefix. Now we are finished with this, the OOP1 and 2, and I will also allow you to the definition of some materials that we, so that you will know about it. The overriding, or it is a polymorphism that happens during compile time. Overloading is a polymorphism that happens during runtime. Process value, a value that has undergone a series of operation and modification. A pure virtual methods, a method that has been implemented into inheriting classes. Unprocessed value, a value that is yet to undergo operating and modification. The last one is a virtual, which does not have a body. Now we are going to discuss also the pointers and references 1 and 2, and after this I'm gonna show you on the actual on VS Code. Okay. Pointers and references 1 first is Introduction to Low-Level C++, a programming language categorized in terms of complexity by A high-level programming language, B, low-level programming language, and C, mid-level programming language. Now we are discussing one by one on this. The first one is the high-level programming languages. It is a set of programming languages that exhibit the strong abstraction and farthest more memory and operating system control. The second one is the low-level programming language. It is a set of programming languages that exhibit the weakest abstraction and closest memory and operating system control. Examples of this are Java, C++, C#, and Visual Basic, .NET, and C++. And then also the last one is the mid-level programming language. It is a set of programming languages that exhibit strong abstraction and some memory and operating control. The pointers, what is a pointer? It's a special type of variables. It is a kind of variables, anyway, that stores the address in the memory rather than the actual value or constant wherein the address can achieve depending on this. These variables are used to companions of the other variables. To extend the coverage of the variables, such point that the original variables are being accessed from different sections of the code without being recreated and reassigned. And then the second one is the references. It is the special type of variables that stores the address in the memory rather than the actual value of constant wherein the address is permanent and unchanging. So the definition of some words that we don't know yet. The address of operator, an operator which retrieve an address in the memory. Casting, a mean to convert the value from one data to another data type. A data type agnostic, data type dependent, may not be accept values or variables belonging to other data without undergoing casting. Differencing operator, an operator that retrieves the value of the variable the pointer is pointing at. Unary operation, an operation that only supports one variable's array, pointers, or references were to perform an operation. And then the binary operator, an operator that supports two. And also we are going to discuss the pointers and reference too. So we have here the action, we have here the variables array, pointers, and references. And what's the difference between them? This is all the variables. The declaration, the variable's name is not preceded by an asterisk or ampersand. And then the pointers, here is that this variable name is preceded with an asterisk, and then in references the variable name is preceded with an ampersand. So in pointers it's asterisk, and then references is ampersand. And then what is the data type? In variables or an array, variables is data type agnostic, and in pointers are data type also agnostic. Same with references. Initialization, so this is might be complicated, or yeah, it is in variables. In an array, variables may be initialized anywhere during and after declaration. I'm still here in initialization. And in pointers, pointers may be initialized anywhere during and after declaration. In references, may be initialized only during declaration. So there's a similar bit similar for the pointers and references. And then the value stored, it is in variable, it is an actual value assigned. And in pointers, address of the variable, same with the references, they have the same. And then the variables reassignment, not applicable for variables. And then in the pointers, change the variables in point 2. And then references cannot change the variable in point 2. Assigning a variable, and in variable an array, variable copies the value of the variable. In pointers, copy the value of the variable and store in the variable and originally points to, and in references, copy the value of the variables and store to the variables and originally points to. And then retrieving the value or standard methods, the variable or array returns a copy of the values it holds, and in pointers, return the address to the variable it points to, and references return the value to the variables in point 2. Retrieving the value or differencing operator. This is not possible for variables and array. And in pointers, return the values of the variables in point 2. And then in references, this is not possible for the references. Retrieving the value, this is the last one, addressing of the operator. In variables, it returns the address that currently occupies in the memory, and pointers returns the address that currently occupies in the memory, the same, and references return the address to variables in the point 2. So I already did discussing about the pointers and references 1 and 2, and also the OOP 1 and 2. I'm gonna show you, we are going to this VS Code, and then I'm showing you how to do it in actual. And then in part 2, we are going also to do that in all VS Code. Okay?
Got it.